Congratulations! You now own a nuclear submarine. Forget how you got here. Tonight you are standing on a pier in the dark, and floating in front of you is 377 feet of black steel that answers to you now. No brochure prepared you for the size. A nuclear attack submarine runs longer than a football field and displaces around 7,800 tons submerged, which means the thing you own weighs about as much as a small cruise ship and hides most of itself below the waterline like an iceberg with a propeller. You reach for the hatch, and that is where the fantasy meets its first quiet problem. You cannot move it. Not because it is broken, but because a vessel like this was never meant to be run by one proud owner with a key. It was built to be operated by a small town of specialists, and tonight, that town has gone home. So let us do the honest thing and find out what it would actually take to keep this dream floating. Start with the price, because everyone starts with the price, and the price is where the trouble begins. A modern American attack submarine of the Virginia class costs the Navy somewhere between $3.5 and $4.5 billion per boat, and the newest ones have crept close to $5. That is the number just to buy a fresh one. You could imagine finding an older, retired hull for less, the way you might buy a used car instead of a new one off the lot. Hold that thought. We will come back to what actually happens to these submarines when they retire, and it will quietly change how you feel about the whole idea. For now, let us assume the $4 billion is spent and the boat is yours. Here is the part the price tag hides. The purchase is the cheap part. A submarine is not a boat you park. It is a floating power plant that happens to be shaped like a boat, and the power plant is nuclear. At the heart of the hull sits a reactor, and that reactor is the reason this machine can stay underwater for months and circle the planet without ever stopping for fuel. Modern boats are built with a reactor core designed to last the entire life of the ship, decades long, so refueling is not even part of your worry list. It is genuinely one of the most impressive things human beings have ever bolted together. It is also the reason almost nothing else about owning it is simple. And here is a beautiful little irony to sit with. The reactor could keep you moving almost indefinitely, but you cannot. The true limit on how long this submarine can stay hidden beneath the waves is not fuel and not machinery. It is food. The boat can outlast its own engines before it outlasts its pantry, which means the endurance of your billion-dollar marvel is set, in the end, by how many meals you can stack inside it. The most advanced vessel you will ever own is quietly governed by its refrigerator. Where do you keep it? Not a marina. Not a private dock behind a nice house. A vessel this size needs deep water, a reinforced pier, and a berth designed to hold a warship. The kind of place that exists is a naval base, and naval bases are not in the business of renting slips to enthusiasts. Even if you built your own, you would be building industrial marine infrastructure from scratch, dredged channels, heavy cranes, security fencing, and shore power strong enough to feed a machine that normally makes its own electricity. And because this is a warship, not a toy, you would need controlled access and a security presence around it at all hours, the way you would guard an arsenal, not a speedboat. Your submarine has not moved a single inch, and you are already running a small, heavily guarded port. Now fill it with people, because this is where the fantasy of the lone owner truly falls apart. A Virginia-class boat carries a crew of roughly 132, and those are not passengers along for the ride. 15 are officers, and more than 100 are enlisted specialists, reactor operators, sonar technicians, electricians, cooks, medics, and the people who keep the air breathable and the water drinkable 1,000 feet down. You do not own a submarine. You own a payroll of 130 highly trained professionals, every one of whom has to be paid, fed, trained, and rotated home to see their families. A personal submarine turns out to be one of the least personal things a human being can possibly possess. Think about what that town needs just to keep breathing. These are not people you can send home at 5 o'clock. On a long patrol, they live inside the hull for weeks or months, so you are not only their employer, you are their landlord, their grocer, their doctor, and their entire world. When one specialist gets sick, or burns out, or simply wants a normal life on dry land, you need a fully trained replacement ready to step into that exact seat. A single vacancy in the wrong role, and the whole machine stays tied to the pier. Step back and really look at what you are running here. A payroll of 130 people. A medical bay, a kitchen serving hundreds of meals a day, a training pipeline that never empties, a staffing problem that never once sleeps. You did not buy a vehicle. You accidentally founded a small, ferociously specialized company whose only product is the ability to disappear underwater and whose headquarters happens to sink on purpose. And these are not skills you hire from an ordinary job listing. The men and women who run naval reactors train for years inside a program that simply does not exist on the open market. That knowledge is deliberately kept inside a small, closed circle. So even with unlimited money in hand, you are shopping for a crew in a store that has no shelves and no front door. Say you solve it anyway. Say you somehow assemble your town. Now you actually have to run it day after day. A normal day aboard your submarine is a quiet miracle of coordination. Before the boat moves at all, dozens of systems are checked by dozens of people. The reactor is monitored without pause. The air is scrubbed of carbon dioxide and remade, and fresh drinking water is pulled from the sea itself. Every valve, every seal, every pump has a specific person responsible for it. Because at depth, a small failure is not an inconvenience, it is the entire story. What looks from the outside like a smooth black shape gliding silently through the water is, on the inside, 130 people running a factory that cannot afford a single bad day. Then there is the simple, unglamorous problem of resupply. Every stretch at sea ends the same way, with the boat coming home to be refilled with food, spare parts, and everything 130 people burn through in a month. Loading a submarine is its own small operation, a human chain passing supplies through narrow hatches into a hull that was designed to hide, not to be convenient. Nothing about this machine was built for the comfort of the person who owns it. It was built to disappear, and everything else is a compromise wrapped around that single purpose. The money does not stop when the boat does. A warship this complex demands constant maintenance, and submarines spend a startling amount of their lives not at sea but in the yard, opened up, inspected, and repaired down to the smallest system. Navies plan for deep overhauls that swallow months and cost fortunes. You are not really paying to use the submarine. You are paying, every single year, for the pure privilege of it continuing to exist and staying ready. And understand what you are really signing up for, in time as much as in money. These boats are built to serve for decades, and a modern submarine commissioned today is expected to still be prowling the oceans well into the 2070s. Ownership here is not a purchase you make once and then simply enjoy. It is a commitment that can easily outlast your patience, your fortune, and quite possibly your life. You are not buying a machine at all. You are adopting a 40-year responsibility that eats money the entire time it breathes. So what do you actually get for all of this? Be fair to the dream, because the dream is real, and it is worth naming out loud. You would own the closest thing to a private world that exists anywhere. A machine that can vanish beneath the surface and stay there, silent and self-sufficient, carrying its own air and its own power, completely indifferent to the storms tearing across the surface overhead. There is real magic in that, and it is not a small thing. Very few objects on the entire planet give their owner that kind of clean independence from the surface of the world. For a certain kind of person, that feeling alone is worth an unreasonable amount of money, and no spreadsheet will ever talk them out of it. But test the dream against a bad day, because ownership is really defined by its bad days, not by its good ones. Imagine a serious fault far out from port, deep in open water. On an ordinary boat, you radio for a tow and wait. Out here, your nearest real help is a specialized shipyard that might sit an entire ocean away, and the exact part you need could be built by a single supplier on a schedule measured in months rather than days. A problem that would sideline a weekend yacht for one afternoon can sideline this machine for a full year. The very qualities that make it extraordinary, its deep complexity, and its total self-sufficiency, are the same qualities that make it brutally unforgiving the moment something finally breaks in the wrong place. And ask the blunt question the fantasy always skips. Who ensures this? A yacht has a policy. A private jet has a policy. There is no quiet office anywhere on Earth writing coverage for a privately owned nuclear warship, which means every risk it carries, every worst case out at sea, every consequence of 130 lives sealed in a steel tube far below the surface, lands squarely and entirely on you. The freedom is total. The exposure is total. And then comes the question that nobody inside the fantasy ever thinks to ask. How on earth do you get rid of it? This is the point where owning a nuclear submarine stops resembling any other purchase on Earth. You cannot simply sell it to the next dreamer with deep pockets. You cannot beach it in a quiet cove and walk away. When a navy retires one of these boats, it does not hold a cheerful auction. It runs a careful, painstaking, staggeringly expensive dismantling program. The fuel is carefully removed and shipped away for long-term storage. The entire reactor compartment is then cut out of the hull, sealed at both ends like a steel coffin, floated up a river on a barge, and buried in a guarded government trench out in the desert, where engineers expect it to rest safely for centuries. Taking one of these machines apart costs tens of millions of dollars, and only a small handful of places on the whole planet are equipped to do it at all. Your exit is not a sale. It is a burial, and you are not even the one invited to perform it. Which brings us, gently and at last, back to the one small detail we left sitting on the pier at the very beginning of the night. In the real world, you cannot own this. Not because you are not quite rich enough, but because a naval reactor and the highly enriched fuel that powers it are among the most tightly controlled objects any government keeps, reserved entirely for the state, and never, under any circumstances, sold into a private hand. The submarine floating in front of you was always going to belong to a navy. The key to this particular door is held by a whole country, not a single person, and it is simply never handed across the table. But do not let that quiet fact end the story, because the desire sitting underneath it is completely reasonable, and there are real legal ways to feed it. If what you actually want is to slip beneath the waves in a vessel that is entirely yours, that world already exists, and it is openly for sale. Personal submersibles, the kind carried aboard large yachts, start at roughly $1 million and climb into the tens of millions for the truly luxurious ones, and they will carry you and a guest or 200s, sometimes thousands, of feet down to see things that almost no one alive ever gets to see with their own eyes. And if what you truly love is the machine itself, the cold steel and the history soaked into it, retired diesel-electric submarines sit quietly in harbors, all around the world, as museums, and some of them are owned and lovingly maintained by private groups and foundations. You can stand inside the real thing, run your hand along the actual pipes, without ever needing a navy, a reactor, or a trench in the desert. So here is the honest ledger, laid out plainly. On one side sits a machine that can carry its own private world beneath the sea, self-sufficient and silent, and utterly unlike anything else a human being can hold the deed to. On the other side sits a crew of 130 souls, a private guarded port, a yearly bill with no ceiling in sight, a single repair that could quietly cost you an entire year, and an ending that involves cutting the beating heart out of your prize and burying it in the ground. The fantasy was never wrong exactly, it was just badly incomplete, and now, finally, it is whole. So the real question is not whether you could somehow handle owning a nuclear submarine. The real question is quieter and much harder than that. If you could keep only one piece of the dream, the pure freedom of disappearing beneath the ocean, or the raw, impossible power of the machine that makes that freedom possible, which one would you actually reach into your wallet and pay for? And which one in the end would you finally choose to let go?